Here on the screen, you can see some examples of how the beam object can be used in Roblox Studio. The beam object has many purposes and create some stunning visual effects in your Roblox games. We'll take a closer look at these examples in a moment, but first, let's dive into how to use a beam object in your own Roblox projects. Okay, so we're going to start just by adding a part. So click up here to add a part. And I'm going to scale this up. All right, so now make sure you have it selected and go back to the Explorer and go next to the part, click on the plus, and we want to search for attachments. So type in A and click on attachment to add attachment to the part. All right, so now that we got the attachment out of the first part, we want to click on that part again and we're going to duplicate it. So go Control D and then make sure you have move selected. We're going to drag the duplicated part over. So now we got two parts, and both those parts have an attachment. So let's go back to the first part, and now we're going to go to that part in the Explorer again, and now we're going to add the beam object. So click on the plus, type B, select the beam. All right, so now we have the beam object added to the part, so select the beam in the Explorer, and we're going to go down to the properties, and underneath shape section in the properties, you're going to see attachment 0 and attachment 1. So we're going to go and click on next to attachment 0. And then your cursor is going to change into this kind of pointy cursor with a little kind of part next to it. And now you're going to go and click on the first attachment we added to the first part. And that's going to associate that to attachment 0. All right, so now we're going to click into the properties section for attachment 1. We'll get the same cursor. And now we're going to go up to the Explorer, expand the second part, and click on the attachment there. And now that attachment is associated to attachment 1. So that completes the setup for the beam. So now we have the beam going between the two parts. So all it's left to do is now just to kind of configure the beam. If you go back, click on the first part there, and we'll click on the attachment. So the attachment kind of controls where the beam is connected to the part. So you can kind of move that attachment up and down. You'll see the beam will kind of move along with the attachment. And you kind of place the attachment wherever you want the beam to be. It doesn't even have to be within the part itself. Be pretty much anywhere. So we'll just kind of leave it here kind of somewhere in the middle here. All right, so let's click on beam again, and we're going to go look at the properties. So the first property is the color property. So this is where you can set the beam color. So you can set it to an individual color, or you can set it to a color sequence. So to set it to an individual color, you just click on here. And you'll get this select color window open. So you can select any color you want in here. Say there, click OK. So now it's kind of got that purple color. If you want a color sequence, go back to the properties and you can get this 3 dots. You can click on the 3 dots. Then you'll have this little window open here. So you can click anywhere along the color here and you can create little triangles where it kind of identify new colors. So I have one added here. So I select in here. And it's going to create like a color gradient. So it starts as purple and it's going to transition into that next color you select here. So I click on, say, green. Click OK. So now you're going to have like a purple to green transition. And then you can move these triangles along depending where you want that color to appear in the sequence. So let's kind of put it in the middle here. And then let's go and click another spot here. Then we can have another color here. Let's say this is going to be blue. So now we have it starting off purple, then it transitions into blue, then that transitions into green and back into purple again. So it kind of gives you a nice little gradient along the beam. Okay, I'm just going to change this back to a solid color. So let's click in here. And let's just change this to blue. So our next property on the list of the properties is enabled. That's a simple toggle on and off. So you can use that in your scripts to turn the beam on and off. Below enable, you got a light emissions. So this will just kind of give it like a glowing effect. So you can increase that value there, and then you'll get a nice kind of glowing light emission off the beam itself. Below light emission, so that's light influence. So that's the lights within the environment of your game and how that impacts the beam itself. And then the cool one here, this is texture. So texture is, you can assign a texture to the beam, and that's going to give it a lot of kind of the cool visual effects that you're kind of trying to achieve with your beam. So I got some textures here we can try out. So the first texture I have is a rainbow texture. So I'm just going to grab that. These are all textures that were in the store for free. So you can find these textures there. And I'll also put these texture IDs in the description of the video so you can find them easily and try them out for yourself. All right, so click in the texture property, and we're just going to paste this into the URL and hit enter. All right, so now we got this cool kind of rainbow texture here. Actually, so the reason why it's kind of not the right color is because I have that color set on the color property, so it's kind of mixing in with the colors of the texture. So I'm going to change that to white, so we'll just get the colors that are of the texture itself. So I'm just going to turn this to white, colors from the texture itself, which is that rainbow color. And you kind of see it has that wavy kind of effect. That's just kind of how the design, there's kind of a little bit of wave in that texture, so it kind of gives that cool little effect. Okay, so the next texture we're going to try is a light beam texture. So I'm going to pop that one into the texture properties. All right, so there's a light beam. So it's kind of a narrow light beam. It looks kind of neat. It's kind of cool little beam effect. So you could probably think of a lot of different ways you could use that within your games for different effects within your games. So it's a white texture. So if you want to change the color of that beam, you can just go back up to the color. Let's change this to a blue beam. Click OK. So now we got a blue beam between the two different parts there. All right, so the last texture we're going to try is just kind of a picture of the Doge dog. Everyone loves the Doge dog. I'll pop that into the texture property. All right, so there's the Doge dog just flowing through our beam. All right, so below the texture prop, there's a few different other texture-related properties that kind of impact the texture itself. So we have texture length, texture mode, and texture speed. So right now we have texture length set to 1, and the texture mode is set to stretch. So you can see that we have just one copy of that texture stretched across our beam, and that's because we have the texture length set to 1 and the texture mode set to stretch. So now say if I change this, so now let's say if I change this texture mode to static, now we have it texture length of 1, so it's just the one length of the actual texture itself, and it's just tiling across the beam. You'll just see kind of flow across the beam. And then the speed at which it kind of moves across the beam is set by the texture speed. So we have that set to 1. So let's increase that to 2. All right, and then you kind of get that's doubling the speed, so that's now moving faster across the beam. Okay, with the texture mode set to static, we have the texture like currently set to 1, but say we wanted this Doge dog to be a little bigger, we could increase the size of that by setting the texture length to, say, doubling that to, say, 2. All right, so now we get a little bigger texture on the beam. And now let's change this mode back to stretch. So with stretch, and we have a texture length of 2, it actually takes the texture and it looks at the length between the beams here, and it stretches it out so that you can fit 2 of those textures in here. All right, so below our texture properties, we have our next property is transparency. So transparency controls like the transparency of the beam itself, so how much you can see through the beam. So it's set to 0.5 here. So if we jack the transparency up to 1, it's fully transparent. You can't see beam whatsoever. But then you bring it down just a little tiny bit. Let's put that 0.9. So it's fairly transparent. You can't really see it too much, but you can kind of see a little bit there. But you can see through it really easily. And you lower that number all the way down to 0, then you're going to have almost no transparency there. You can't really see through the beam anymore. It's not transparent at all because it's more like a solid beam. All right, so the next prop we're going to look at now is the curve size 0 and curve size 1. So you can create curves with these beams and kind of make them curve in different directions. So you control the curve with these curve size properties and also with the orientation of the attachments themselves. So let's go to curve size 1 here. Let's set this to 45. So I got the curve size 0, it's set to 45. We kind of got this big kind of jagged angle here. But what we can do is I'm going to select the attachment from part 1 and then go to rotate. And let's rotate this a bit. So that will impact the curve also. So let's rotate this. All right, so you can kind of see now we got this curve here. Let's rotate a little more here. And then I'm going to spread my parts out a bit so we can kind of spread it out a bit here. Okay, so now that we got that, let's go back to the curve size on the beam property. Okay, so let's look at the curve size on the beam property again, and now we're just going to adjust this value here. You'll see how this curve kind of changes as we adjust that value. So I move this here. You can kind of see we're getting it. We go into negatives, it'll curve the other direction. So you can kind of just play with this and adjust this and kind of get the kind of curve you want to get. Curve 0 is on this side here, and then curve 1 would be from this side here. So let's go to the attachment of the second part. We're going to adjust this a bit so it's kind of rotated around here. And then go back to the beam property. And now we can adjust that value there. We can say curve here a little bit. All right, so the next property is face camera. So I have that turned on here. So you have that check mark there to have it turned on. And so what that will do, that'll keep the beam facing the direction of the camera. So now, since I have that face camera turned on, if I move the camera around, you'll see that the beam is changing position and it's facing the direction of the camera. Now, if I turn it off, it's going to go back to its standard orientation there. Okay, so I kind of adjusted the properties of the beam and our parts here, just kind of just give you a little demonstration of the segments property we're going to look at next. So I've moved the attachment up higher here on the one side, and I've changed the segments down to 2. All right, and I also have a curve set here, so it gives a little curve so you can kind of see the different segments. So what the segments does is it gives you the number of straight sections within the beam itself. So currently I have the segment set to 2. So that gives us one segment here and another segment here. So test one has a total of 2 segments. So if you have a curve, the more segments you have, the more transition you'll have between those 2 segments, the smoother that curve will look. So if I increase the segments here and say increase it up to 10, you're going to have a cleaner curve, right? So see now this cleaner curve because we have a lot more segments for that curve to kind of transition throughout. So last properties we're going to look at on the beam is the width properties. So you have a width 0 and a width 1 property. So you can control the width on each side of the beam. So right now we have the width set to 1 on both width 0 and width 1. So say I want the beam to be a little thicker on this side and kind of have it expand as it goes along the beam. So I can go down here to width 1. Let's change that to 5. All right, so you got a lot thicker beam on this side, and this stays at 1. It's kind of neat, so you can kind of control the width of the beam. It's just another way you can kind of adjust the appearance of the beam. All right, so we're back at the examples I had at the beginning of the video here. So I'm not going to go over these in too much detail. I'm just going to go over this quickly here. It's just some examples of what you can do with the beam. So the very first one here. So if you look at my character here, so I have a little arrow here going towards this part. So this is something you commonly see in a lot of games here, where you have a beam used to guide the player to a certain area. So this one's actually being generated by a script. So I'm going to go over that script at the end here. This first example here. So this example here is just an example of a texture that's a subscribe button, just kind of beaming across between the 2 objects there. It's kind of a very simple one there, just an example of what something you can do, different textures you can use. This one here, so I have a little ramp I built in Blender, and so I have a texture here of an arrow, just have a little blue colored, and we use the curves to kind of make it curve up the ramp, so it kind of gives a nice little cool little effect there for the ramp. I kind of like that, it's kind of neat. So this one here is another example of something you'll commonly see in games, this little path kind of created with a texture and a beam. We have another example here. So this one is an example of using the beam to make it look like there's energy flowing into the wall. So this could be used for a lot of kind of cool effects in games. Say like you have something and you're kind of transporting energy into a different direction for a special effect. So it's just using the beam. You can see we have the 2 segments set on here with a little bit of a curve. The texture that gives you that kind of energy effect, a little bit of transition, and a little bit of illumination into the beam. Last one here is just an example of a curve with the color sequence. It's just kind of a cool little beam to show off here. It shows off the curves and the color sequence and what you can do with that. All right, so this is the script that generates that beam with the green arrow that's guiding the player to a certain location. So in this script, we're just getting the player service at the start here on line 1. And then we're going to get the destination part. So this is the part that we're going to. So that part we have in our workspace, and it's called go here. So we're just getting that part. And then we have the player add event here, and we're connecting to that with a function. Within that function, there it has the character add event. Then we use await first child on the character to look for the head and make a reference to the head. And we're creating 2 attachments here, one that we're adding to the head, and then we're adding to the destination part. And at the bottom of the script here, we're just assigning the attachments. Then we're just setting the properties on the beam to get the desired effect that we want for that beam. Setting the texture and the texture speed, mode, length, and other related properties to give it the look that we want. And the result of that script is this nice little beam going to this destination part over here. All right, that's it for beams. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe. Thanks.